So, Jim Newman, thanks very much for joining me on Hermitix podcast.
Yeah, thanks.
This is a tough one for me because often when I invite people on, they've written a book or they have a thing that they're going to talk about, or a philosophy or even an idea. And I mean this in the kindest way possible. You don't have anything to bring, do you?
There's not even anyone here to say anything.
So who am I talking to?
Nothing. But to be clear, it's nothing speaking.
How are we going to ground this for anyone who doesn't know?
Oh, you can't. Ground it would mean to make it an experience. Mm-hmm. And that's, a lot of people do say that they get confused when listening to, what we share. And the confusion is, although it's understood, they can't make an experience out of it.
So what if I did your introduction for you and then you tell me where I went wrong?
Awesome.
So, as I understand it, Jim Newman is someone who had a non-dual awakening and now talks, doesn't teach, and certainly isn't a spiritual teacher, who goes places and talks, and people pay money to listen to him talk about nothing for a while, and he uploads videos. But largely the grounding there is that you are you're a person who speaks about non-dual, not what's known as non-duality.
Right.
Is that somewhat about right there?
I mean, in a way, yeah. I mean, if we're, because people are going to listen to this, it's probably good to clarify some of it. There wasn't a non-dual awakening.
Okay.
There isn't anyone to have the awakening. It's the end of the experience that what's happening is personal, that it's happening to someone. And that ending sort of, in a way, reveals that although the experience is that it is personal sometimes, that it isn't. It never has been personal. There is no individual, there is no you, there is no me. There is simply nothing being, whatever it is, like this conversation. And there isn't someone that travels around or there isn't a Jim Newman traveling around giving talks. There's just this body there without anyone in it, which apparently travels around and gives talks.
Sorry.
That's all right. And in a sense, you could say they're listening to nothing, but it seems that almost everyone knows what we're talking about because it's more real than the experience of being a person. And something about sharing this, communicating this with others, there's something else that happens. There's a resonance you can see it in the audience. The people will begin to shake their head yes, and it's obvious that they don't know they're doing it. And that's kind of what happens. So yeah, there is a certain intellectual understanding, as we talked about, that can lead to confusion because it never becomes an experience. But there's also something else happening.
And in this space, you're commonly referred to as the most uncompromising non-dual.
Well, there's others, and it's uncompromising simply because there isn't any compromise. There isn't anyone to compromise with or anything to compromise with.
So would you bracket all, you should do this might help you get there, all of that directions, practices, exercises, would you bracket that all under compromising?
Well, it speaks to a person. It speaks to someone with free will and choice. It confirms the experience that separation is real and that something needs to happen for this to be whole. And just none of that's true.
So to go into, to begin, I'm probably going to play devil's advocate for the whole conversation, I guess, but let's talk in everyday terms. As far as I can see right now, I'm looking at my screen, what I would call my screen, and there is all
Yeah.
the experiences that are related to something here. And I would
Yeah.
assume, to the best of my knowledge, apparently, that the same is happening where you are. So,
Yeah.
what's that? Just two experiences?
Well, that is the dream of the individual. That because when there is an individual, when that sense of a person appears in a body, it necessarily assumes that everybody is having the same experience. And there isn't anyone here having an experience.
There's just experiencing.
Well, no, there isn't there's no experiencer. There's just happening, but it doesn't happen for anyone.
Mhm. So what is I mean, if we step back, what do we mistakenly, well, I say we, I'm going to have to do that. What do we mistakenly perform intellectually when we think there's an individual or an I?
Oh, and it's not intellectual. It's actually held in the body.
Mhm.
The experience of being an individual is held in the body. And that sense of being an individual, that physically held sense of being an individual, makes it seem like thoughts are personal and feelings are personal and basically everything is about me. And that experience brings about a sense that what's happening is real. I'm real and everything else is real. That it's personal and that it has meaning, purpose, and that sense of separation when it arises, there's a sense that comes with that something's missing.
Mhm.
And so that comes the need for something to happen. It's probably one of the biggest confusions or biggest difficulties for the individual listening to this is it being convinced fundamentally that something needs to happen and that Jim is talking about something that has happened. It will listen to this as something that it could find or know, missing that what we're talking about is already.
The body seems to be of importance, and so would you say that what you call in many of your other videos a contraction, tension,
Yeah.
that's prior, if we can speak of prior, to thoughts, emotions. That's the foundation of
Yeah.
the self, and then the thoughts. So what is
It's
it
not
is it,
thought. But
but they're thereafter, but is it literally felt, this kind of contraction?
well, in the story of Jim, it was only recognized as the tension, the ground of the experience of being personal when it stopped happening. Before that, it was always too intrinsic to the experience. There was no reference point to see it as anything but the way things are. So it was only when that apparently stopped happening, it was like, oh,
But is that in the same sense that, say, if I was tensing my hand right now and then released, I'd
yeah,
feel that? Is it
yeah,
literally in that same way?
yeah, totally, yeah.
That's strange, isn't it? So what's the importance of the body then?
Well, there isn't. I mean, in the sense of what we're talking about, the importance is that's where that sense of being a person sits. But when there isn't a person, what's obvious is that there isn't any importance about it. So, what I think one thing that might be uncommon for a message, and there isn't a message that that's shared is that it's not about trying to help anyone have the same insight or realization or anything like that. It's already patently obvious that everything is already perfect. That need doesn't have any reality beyond the personal experience of it.
What about when I burn my coffee? That's not perfect.
Well,
I'm not trying to be coy. It's just
no,
it's a lighter example than
the
when
individual
someone gets hit
lives,
by a car or something.
yeah, the individual lives in a world of comparison, of trying to find a better experience. And that's just the personal experience of this. And when there isn't any one, it's obvious that everything is completely new, exactly as it is. And in that, without comparison, and as a consequence, it can be called perfect. There's no comparison to what is.
Because it just is.
It's, well, yeah, but without meaning, purpose, or intention.
So far we have a body unto which there is happening. We say
Yeah.
that much? Yeah.
Well, the body is also just the same happening. It's not, there's not a separate body to everything. The body is just a happening, like everything else is a happening.
We appear to be limited in what we can experience, what happening we can be. We appear to be limited in what happening there can be happened, could we say, by things of the body, ears, eyes, right? So
Yeah.
it apparently seems to play a role in what can be experienced as happening.
That's the experience of the individual being limited by the body, that the body is its position in the reality it calls its life. When there isn't anyone, there isn't any position. There's a body, but it's not a body for anyone. There isn't any sense that the skin is a boundary, a personal boundary between an inside and outside. It's an apparent boundary. There's, emotions seem to happen in the body, but there isn't anyone having that experience.
But Jim, as someone who has seen this, even though there's nothing to see, you're not experiencing me from the corner of that room or over the road.
There isn't anyone experiencing you at all.
This just is.
Yeah.
But you're not experiencing, you don't have some means to travel outside of the seeming limitations of your body.
Well, I don't know there isn't an entity here that travels in that way, but there isn't anything limited by the body. There isn't an experience of being limited by the body senses or anything else.
So how does that differ from the belief in being limited by the body that many people would assume?
Yeah. Well, it's not a belief. I mean, in a way it is, but it's not fundamentally a belief. It's that contracted energy in the body, which seems to have a position inside the body, which leans the experience that the thoughts are my thoughts and the feelings are my feelings. And that seeing is a limitation. Everything becomes a limited experience related to the person, related to me and my body and my feelings.
So when depression or sadness arises, what's that?
Depression or sadness.
Just arising,
But it would only happen. Sadness could arise here, but it would be difficult for depression to arise. Just because there isn't anyone. Depression, I mean, if you take the word literally, it's depressed, to depress, suppress. There isn't anyone to which the emotions are happening, so they just happen. So there isn't anyone to depress them.
Is a greater distance between happening and...
No, this isn't a new position. Jim doesn't have a new detached position. There just isn't a Jim. Everything is nothing. And there just isn't anyone in it.
So to emphasize, what would you say is the difference, even though it's all the same thing, really, between someone who tells themselves that they're a self that is sad, and Jim, sadness is happening? What's the difference between those two modes?
Well, sadness is happening is very simple. It's just sadness happening. An individual has a story about the appearance, about what's happening to it. And so it has this whole construct or structure around its ideals and beliefs and concepts about what the appearance means. And so a sadness would arise in that construct. And the individual will then try to have it will tinker with it in some way. It'll try to make it better or worse if that's its gig. Try to distance itself. Try to do something with it, as it does with absolutely everything.
So this arises in whatever form, and then do you think one of the reasons might be that we seek to control it, understand it, know it?
The individual
Mm.
is a very insecure experience. And so it does. It tries to control circumstances. It tries to control its emotions. Its fundamental intention is to find more,
Mm.
just more, continuum. Above that comes a better experience. But it really is happy with being unhappy as long as it can continue.
So would you equate unhappiness with the infinite lack that is the supposed self?
There is what you might call infinite, but it's not infinite because it's restricted to the survival of the body. There isn't a me without a body. So it's not infinite. But as long as there's a sense of separation, there is a sense of lack.
What is this sense of separation? I mean, what is that exactly? That
I'm
that
here
that the
and you're
cup
there.
is here, and okay, and that isn't.
That's a dream. That's a dream that comes out of that contracted energy and the body that says, that feels, I'm real.
So if we take away the well, not take away, if we for the moment pause all our common beliefs and understand that we're not who we are. Is it simply is that Jim is happening, James is happening, whatever it is, and it's in this sense, it almost seems like there's not even space because all I've got is this, and all you've got is that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. Well, there's apparent space. There seems to be space, but space and time and distance and computers are nothing appearing as space. So it's just nothing appearing.
What's nothing?
Yeah. What can't, please explain to me what can't be known.
Well, you often say nothing and everything are nothing is everything, everything is nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form.
Can you explain that, or is that
Well, just that everything is already absence. There's no solidity or fixed reality to what is. It's just nothing seeming to happen.
so? If I'm sure you've had this done to you 1,001 times, but this pen, like what? Is it just shapes? Is it colors, or is it just there's just
Yeah,
everything?
it's a pen.
Okay, that's good
It's
to know.
it's not it's nothing penning.
How does that differ from how we'd usually conceptualize it?
Well, you can't really conceptualize nothing penning. I mean, as a concept, it's a paradox.
Mm.
It is and it isn't.
How isn't it? Because it certainly seems that it definitely is. Because
It's empty of any objective reality.
because it's too immediate.
Well, it doesn't have anything to do with time, really.
Mm.
It's just that it's empty. The individual, when it looks at something, the solidity, the realness that it senses itself to be,
Mm.
it sees in everything else. Time, space, pens, and that is a dream. That reality, that solidity, that fixedness is a dream of the person.
A dream in the same way that the person is that they're kind of constantly clutching to something to define themselves, but actually, if you scrape it away, there never was anything.
Absolutely.
So this is, and it's, I don't want to withdraw this to a linguistic game, but this whole edifice of a pen is reliant on 50 different concepts that are interconnected, but really beneath
No,
them. No.
the whole realness
Mm.
of the pen, all the separateness of the pen is reliant on the experience of being an individual. But
Without.
the pen is still apparently a pen.
Mm.
It just doesn't have that sort of reality that it does for the person. It just doesn't have it.
Do you find buying groceries very difficult then?
No, it's actually really ordinary. What we're talking about is, in a way, is natural. It's ordinary. It's simple. There's nothing special about it at all.
Natural is an interesting word. Would from that, and I know you have an interest. At least I understand that you have an interest in science and
Yeah,
evolution in these terms.
yeah,
How would you perceive the individual in those terms? Do you see it somewhat as an error, as you mentioned that this is natural?
yeah.
Is it? Would you see it as an error, a fault?
No, it's not. It's not an error because there's nothing right or wrong about anything. There isn't any any sort of meaning behind there being an apparent person or there not being an apparent person. It's they're both of those seeming situations are just nothing appearing as an apparent person or not. It's only in the dream of the individual that something needs to change, that something needs to happen.
So all the scientific theories that you read, I mean, what are they? Just an interest that arises
Yeah,
with you?
totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cooking, politics, there's interests.
Take it all down.
It's just simple.
mm. Why? Well,
The individual lives in, well, it actually doesn't just live in, it loves complication. It loves to see its emotions and its feelings and its story about its life or the story of a life as complicated. And there isn't, yeah, there isn't even a life really.
mm.
There's just what apparently happens. It's just simple. It would be boring for the individual.
Is there a difference between the natural? Let's call it. Well, let's not call it the natural state because that was UG Krishnamurti said that. But what you,
Oh, didn't
yeah, he called it the natural state, but his thing was a little bit different, I think.
yeah.
Um, um, what you called natural and the individual, is there actually a difference?
No, there isn't actually anything. So there isn't actually a difference. Everything is just ephemeral, apparent.
Mm.
It's just nothing appearing.
So the fact
So
we can talk about
actual
is
difference.
another story.
What's that?
The fact we can talk about, you can talk from where you are, which
Yeah.
people are coming to your meetings and for whatever reason.
Yeah.
The fact that that can be spoken about as some difference.
Yeah.
What's that?
Well, the only difference is that there's a dream of an individual that says there's a difference. So here, there isn't actually a here, but here it's obvious that there's no difference to James. There's no difference. It's just two bodies which are nothing bodying, talking.
Mm.
There's no difference. There's no difference to anything. It's all nothing appearing to happen.
Mm.
But if there is a person arising in a body, it will necessarily seek for a better experience or more experience.
Well, it's a shame.
And
It's a shame about the full head of hair where Jim is. But
that's an apparent full head of hair.
yeah, I'm apparently bald. So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you can feel better about that. You're not really bald. You're only apparently bald.
thanks, Jim. You made my week. Um. Okay. So, I mean, we're sort of destroying everything, and reasons again. What are they? This is impossible, isn't it? Really?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
And what's become very clear is that although the individual will tell you it wants to know, the impossibility to know is really the love of it all. If it's known, it becomes a thing and it's no longer the unconditional love that it is. So fundamentally, there isn't actually a want to know, because it would just become something else to put in the pocket and carry around in the sense of separation. So there is a real beauty in the fact that it can't be known.
From that, what do you see answers as then? Insecurity?
And yeah, totally. Absolutely. The individual lives in a in a what is it? Just goes around in a circle in a knowing experience. never finding anything of substance because there isn't truly anything of substance. It just continues to seek.
And it doesn't need that seeking to basically
Well,
justify its own to
it,
while you're
it,
seeking, you feel it's real, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but there isn't anyone to realize it's not real. There isn't a me that can know or not know what we're talking about.
So there's a gap somewhere.
Well, there isn't actually, but for the individual, it'll come up with all sorts of ideas of what this means to it. And literally it doesn't mean anything to it. Because it can't get any idea of what we're talking about. Because it's everything. There's nowhere to get an idea of it from.
So in this tradition, there's Advaita, and then there's Neo-Advaita, and then non-dual seems to bracket a lot, or just kind of the whole thing. With Advaita, at least traditional Advaita, emphasizing practice and a tradition and things you can do. Neo-Advaita saying completely acausal.
Yeah.
Is there nothing that can be done?
Well, the reason nothing can be done is because there isn't any separation already. Everything is already whole. It's needlessly as it is. So there's a dream that appears in this needlessness that says I'm real and I need something. Something has to happen. There is no hope for that because there is no connection between that and wholeness, because there isn't any separation between that and wholeness. It is wholeness saying something needs to happen.
What would you make of, I mean, just to throw some abstract terms at you that aren't really, they're adjacent to practice, but they're different. So terms such as submission, exhaustion, fatigue, even giving up, because there is this seeming causation that so many people talk about. They sort of built themselves up in this seeking, and then it was when they gave up. But you can't willingly give up, right? That's sort of a paradox in itself. But do you know what I'm gesturing towards there with those sort of terms? Yeah.
That something could happen. I mean, it's what it's all about.
With those though, those seem to be a happening that almost finally has nothing to do with the individual. Can't have anything. You can't willingly. It's almost like you can't willingly submit. You can't say,
right,
I give up. That doesn't make any sense.
Who's going to say to submit? There has to be separation of what's submitting to something else. So submission is just another confirmation that there's someone to submit. Just like exhaustion. I mean, if you're talking about physical exhaustion, yeah, I mean, that happens. But if we're talking about some sort of spiritual ideal of exhausting the need to seek, that's just a confirmation of there's someone there being exhausted of seeking. Giving, it's just another experience for the individual. Surrender is just another experience of the individual.
So what of all your memories? Because I understand you sought for a long time, or supposedly.
Yeah.
What of all your memories of all of that now is?
Oh, well, they're just memories.
Yeah.
There's memories.
Yeah.
They're not very distinct, but I'm sure if there was a question, there'd come some memory. But there isn't any rummaging around and all of that. What's clear, though, is that not everyone is interested in what we're talking about or spirituality in general. There's sometimes arises a certain sensitivity that drives the individual to something it can't know. And that can be spiritual seeking or something else. So, there in the story of Jim, there was an openness to something else. And that started at a very young age, actually. And that's how seeking, in the spiritual way came about, looking for some better experience, really, because the individual can't do anything else. But fundamentally, there was an openness, a sensitivity to the limited nature of the individual, in the sense that there had to be something else.
But that has no relation to this.
Well, it doesn't really. nothing has a relation to this because it didn't really happen. There isn't anything really happening. It apparently happens, but it only really happens, and it only really matters if there's a sense of separation, a person to which it's happening to. It's only in that dream world is the sense that events are stepping stones to what's longed for or what's wanted.
Reality and the individual are inherently basically one. What the individual would usually call reality.
So I would say there's what is and isn't.
Mm.
For the individual, there's only what is.
Mm.
And in that way, it's real. It's real to it.
Okay. Where do you stand on someone such as Nisargadatta, who, this return to the I am, that we are all of the same ocean and are each, if you want to quickly use that word, each a wave, but always of the ocean.
Yeah, I'm not real proficient with Nisargadatta. Yeah. There is a quote in I Am That, you've got to be extreme to reach the supreme, which is fundamentally very dualistic.
Because something has to be done.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said, I'm not an expert, but I think in his later years, he wrote a book sort of saying, oh, never mind. It's all nothing. I could be wrong, but I think that's somewhere in there.
Is there any, because I don't know if you've heard of Paul Hederman.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
So Paul Hederman talks about seeing this, and he says that you travel lighter, which seems to me to say that there is some connection between, because the individual isn't going to go away. Maybe fully. As the individual gone?
Totally. Well, it's an illusion.
Completely gone for you.
Absolutely. Well, not for me.
Yeah.
There never is an individual.
Okay. So there seems what's traveling, if you agree with Hederman there, what's traveling lighter?
Well, the individual is a real heaviness of meaning, purpose, intention, and all the things that come out of that. The sense that that this is somehow lacking or missing something that needs to be found. That's heavy. That's heavy, man. So it certainly is, without that, that is sort of what happens. There's a tension that just sort of leaves. And you could call that lighter.
Especially in relation to emotions and things like that are arising.
Yeah. Yeah.
They seem to have a causation there, don't they?
Oh, there's apparent cause and effect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
the individual, when those thoughts and feelings happening to an individual, they seem that, the dream is they have a reality that they don't have. The same reality the individual experiences itself to have is imparted to feelings and emotions. They happen to someone.
So if I was to ask a loaded scenario, let's say Jim finds sorry to put this on you, Jim finds a stray little baby kitten.
Yeah.
Emotions might arise of
totally.
of love and care and wanting to help.
Yeah. Yep.
But that's all just happening.
But love arises for car tires. It doesn't have to be a baby kitten.
Do you love a car tire?
This there's just a sort of a love of what is.
Yeah.
And that can be a car tire or a rock.
Yeah. So would you say then that the scenario I gave you is really tied up with a story that we call morality?
Yeah. Although I think there's something in here in this that has a sensitivity, in bodies in general, to babies and things.
That's just physiological.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say.
So there is a physiology, there is matter for you.
Well, of course, there's apparent matter. It's immaterial, but it's apparently matter. Absolutely. Everything is what we're talking about leaves things more the same than the individual could imagine and more different than the individual could imagine. Just
Every
because it's not in the same world that the individual lives in.
absolutely everything's changed and everything's the same.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And there's nothing to be done.
Well, there isn't anyone. Doing happens. There's nothing to be done about freedom because all there is freedom. But there isn't anyone to do anything in the first instance.
I've heard you mention freedom a lot. How would you, if you could, how would you go into that? What do you mean? Because freedom, commonly conceptualized, freedom is what usually related to what we've already spoken about, which is more freedom to have, to add,
That's right.
to buy, to choose.
Yeah.
What's this freedom that you
Well,
gesture towards?
it's what I'm talking about is unrecognizable freedom. And that freedom is everything already. It's the unfettered, the unconstrained nature of what is, that it has no limitation, that it could be anything. And that could be anything is what this is. So it's free to be anything, and it just happens to appear as this. There's no continuum or rules that it needs to adhere to. It could be anything. This could be anything.
Could be, but there's no one to choose, so
No.
what will be will be.
Yeah. Oh, well, apparently. There isn't a real will be. I mean, there's an apparent will be, maybe. If the body dies, what is just, yeah, then will be doesn't make any sense.
I was just about to bring in death, so
yeah. Oh, great. Yeah.
Fantastic. How do you, I mean, what's changed? Do you have...
Oh, the individual is, all fear is the fear of death. Mm-hmm. And death for the individual is a sense of loss. So it could be the loss of self-image, the loss of a pen, and the biggest fear.
My favorite pen.
The biggest fear will be the fear of death, because that's the loss of everything. And it comes out of the dream that there is an individual that has something like a life or senses or a pen, and that they could be lost. And that hides the reality that what is already so insubstantial. There isn't anything that could be had or owned. And so when there isn't anything to be had or owned, there isn't any fear of loss.
You usually say at the start of your talks, this is no one wants to hear this. This is like, one of the most, could we say, subversive messages, or
I don't know about subversive.
Maybe not subversive, because that implies a system. But no one wants to hear this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think that's because if it was heard, which what in the sense of your meetings or what you talk about, what you're really talking to in the sense you've just spoken about death is you're talking about death.
Yeah.
You're going
to
die. If you accepted this, you're going to die.
Well, you can't accept it. But if this is heard, it's the end of you.
What is it to hear it? Because that's strange, isn't it? That it can't be heard is very strange.
Yeah, totally. Totally. In a sense, you could say it's really strange. I guess for the individual, it sounds strange. But from here, it's obvious that everybody already knows what we're talking about. It's more real than the experience of being separate. But it's overlooked by the experience, because what we're talking about can't be known, and the individual is addicted to knowing. So it just wants to know more. It thinks it's going to find security in knowing, hiding the fact that knowing I am, is actually a demand to continue knowing I am, to reconfirm my own existence.
Is it what all spiritual seeking is, do you think?
Oh, so in the meetings, it seems like there's kind of mostly two things going on. There are questions and there is seeking happening. There are individuals. So the individual fundamentally wants an answer. But I think at the same time, especially if people stay, there's an openness to this being about something else that isn't personal, that isn't an answer.
Do a lot of people not stay?
Yeah, well, not a lot. In the beginning, it was more.
Why were you more ruthless, more uncompromising?
No, I think because it was newer. This has been around now for a while, and people hadn't heard it, and they thought they were going to come to a meditation or some sort of spiritual, something they would recognize. And this just didn't resonate, and so they left. Sometimes, really.
You still get people leave?
Which I totally understand that people would get angry at this.
I mean, it's a bit of a facile question, but what's the strangest reaction you've had to this?
The strangest?
Well, or one that stands out, maybe.
Nothing really.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, people leaving is probably about as dramatic as it gets. I mean, I guess one of the more surprising is that people will call me on the phone or write me a text and say, "I watched a video of yours. There isn't anyone here. Thanks."
And they're done.
That's done. It's over. There's nothing left.
And then they go on and live their life. Well, a life is lived. A life is lived.
Well, there's just no one left.
Something might be happening somewhere.
Well, apparently.
Yeah. And people pay for this?
I know.
It's ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, I don't know.
I mean that in a kind way. So what are your meetings? No meditation?
Oh, dear.
I mean, is there food served at these retreats?
Well, there's tea and cookies.
Yeah, but people can't choose, obviously. That's already done for them.
Well, choosing happens. No one chooses.
So, but no, it's just, it's intriguing. Just the retreats, if you want to call them a retreat, it's just you talking? Not the whole time.
There's, there'll be an introduction which sort of lays out sort of the groundwork of, the concepts basically. And then there's, discussions about it. Yeah.
Do you have return customers?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Return customers.
Why do you think that is?
Well, there's, as we talked about, I don't know that I have said this, what we're talking about is what, in one way, not the individual, but what's longed for. And sometimes that's heard. In the story of Jim, I went to meetings because it was the closest I could get to home. There was something touched deeper than, Jim could understand, but it was a sense of being home. It wasn't home because it was just the sense of it, but it was kind of the closest I could get.
It's interesting you say what's longed for. I know we're sort of at the mercy of language here, but how does that longed for differ from, say, spiritual seeking, where there's many things you think you long for?
Yeah.
Whatever it might be. They seem to be of the same, there's a thing that I'm going to get. So what's this longed for?
It's the absence. That's what's longed for, absence, which the individual doesn't want, can't want, really.
There's no way to want it.
There's no way to want your own absence. And that I differentiate between wanting and longing.
Okay.
The individual wants more. And that sense of separation engendered out of that sense of loss that comes with a sense of separation comes a sense of longing to be home, not for anyone.
Seems a little tragic in a way then that what's longed for is already.
That's perfect word. It is. It's tragic. It's sad. It's sad that we can sit here and have this conversation and there might be the sense of separation that somehow says this isn't it. And that sense of separation is wholeness, home, saying this isn't it. Doesn't matter though.
No.
It is a little sad.
Is it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it would because it's peaceful.
Well, it's whatever it is. I think putting words on it is misleading.
Okay. Well, I don't want to say that it's some state of bliss, but it
Yeah.
certainly seems your videos certainly seem to give peace. And
Oh,
I don't mean
oh,
in a I don't mean in a
some people it makes them angry.
I guess that is their peace then.
Yeah.
Mm. So what is is that there's no differences, you know, your life isn't any different. I mean, to put it down to something even very banal, and I'm
Well,
sure
there isn't anyone. The thing is that there isn't anyone left that has a life.
yeah.
There isn't anyone having an experience of moving through time.
But what I would say is I'm never going to eat olives because I hate them. And I'm sure
Yeah.
right? That's not going to happen. So
Yeah.
what's that thread? There seems to be
Oh, well,
what's something
this,
seems stored there.
yeah, sushi.
You don't like sushi.
Love of
Oh,
sushi.
love of sushi. Right. So you're over there, sushi is going to happen more often, maybe.
Well, yeah. Actually, a little less often. When there's an individual and there's that sort of preference, it imbues it with some sort of meaning and purpose and drive. And and when there's just a preference for sushi, if there were an apparent choice, this might choose sushi. But there isn't a drive anymore to satisfy that fundamental lack or need of the individual. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
But then all those ifs are in the future, so they seem to not really matter anyway, right?
Well, this doesn't even matter.
Mm.
This, for the individual, this matters because it's about something. It's about it.
Mm.
And fundamentally, it's about it having more.
Mm.
So it matters in fundamentally in its continuation. And in its continuation, it matters as a stepping stone to having more, to knowing more, to experiencing more.
It's all very simple, isn't it?
It is simple.
Yeah.
It's, yeah.
I mean, just the individual does not like simplicity.
No, it likes complication.
Yeah. That's why, maybe that's why our spiritual systems are so complicated.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It is.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the individual, there's a sense in the individual that it's special.
Mm.
And the individual has a sense that complication is, in a way, makes it more special. If it's really complicated.
Yeah. But it never goes right down to the root of all the complexities, which is nothing.
Nothing. Well, and there's, yeah, it's too simple.
Yeah. So all,
It's too, they're just talking.
which is
They're
just
just
gesturing.
talking and listening and gesturing. That's it.
Yeah.
That's all. It doesn't have any meaning, purpose, or intention. It's already complete and whole.
If there's an experience, you haven't got it.
There isn't anyone to experience.
Well, the reason I say that is a lot of spiritual people will be listening, and of course, this might possibly, and it often does in some conversations, seem to ride up against some things such as enlightenment or mystic revelation, or and you're not glowing. You don't have an aura, unfortunately.
Oh, I turn it off.
You turn it off. Yeah, Zoom can't process it. But there isn't anything. There isn't. I mean, I guess it's going to be a grand disappointment to anyone listening. There was no moment for you.
No. Well, there is. Yeah,
but
it wasn't that no moment for me. There just isn't a moment, and there isn't any me. But no, glowing and sitting on thrones and having funny hats on and all of that, that speaks to the individual sense of being special. And that enlightenment or freedom has something to do with complication and achievement and authority. So those sorts of displays relate to that experience of separation. The individual doesn't want simplicity. And it can't want nothing. And it can't want absence. But it is what's longed for.
So none of this has anything to do with the individual, really.
Well, there isn't.
Other than in the negative. Well,
so in the end of it,
when you say there isn't one, that there is, but it's an illusion. Could we go that far?
So for the individual, every body is another individual. But what becomes obvious when there isn't anyone is there isn't anyone anywhere. And that's already the case. There are no individuals. There is no, the individual is the experience that the appearance is of separate things apart from each other and its experience of them. And that never actually happens. There isn't enough time and there isn't any real distance for any of that ever to really happen. So there aren't any individuals. But the individual, yeah, that's what I just said doesn't mean anything.
But there was at some point an individual called Jim, an illusory one, in the sense that people think there is.
Yeah.
And
yep.
It's gone.
Yep.
What happened?
Nothing.
Nice.
It just isn't something that it isn't. So for the individual, happening is the acquisition of something else. A new experience, if that's it. An enlightenment, something or other. And it was a total loss.
Yeah.
But it wasn't but it wasn't real. There wasn't a real loss. There wasn't a real Jim that disappeared. There just never is a Jim or a James. There just isn't. That just never actually happens.
It's interesting because when there's glimpses, you can't remember them. There's nothing there. So when you say total loss, though, that must differ in some way because you can still function. It's almost like I feel like you couldn't exist.
Hold on. You just said you can't remember them. Why wouldn't it be the same? There just isn't anyone here to remember what this is like. But in a glimpse, they were still functioning.
Yeah. And usually laughing.
Yeah.
There is.
Yeah.
Because the whole thing's ridiculous. I laughed at a hedge last week for about, I can't remember. It's absurd.
Hedges are really funny, though.
They are. Especially when they're really there.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's the same. There isn't a difference. I think one of the ideas the individual has is there's something special about what we're talking about, rather than simplicity of laughing at a hedge. They're just being what is without anyone knowing about it.
The glimpses and that never seems to tarry anywhere close to what we might call negative emotion, though.
Oh, I don't know what that negative emotion.
Well, sadness, worry, anxiety. It's not none of that. There's not a glimpse that's full of anxiety or sadness, or at least I haven't. That hasn't been experienced here, and so it seems that the natural state isn't anything to do with what we could call unhappiness.
Well, it isn't to do with anything, but it can include sadness. We talked earlier about, the tragedy of there being this sense of separation that's seeking something for itself, all the while being in what's longed for. There can be a sadness that arises about that.
Maybe I'm not articulating myself very well. The closest word I can get is beautiful. That even if there's sadness, even if there's what we consider negativity in the broadest sense, the whole thing still has a felt sense of contentment and beauty.
Yeah,
love.
Absolutely.
Love. There you go.
Absolutely.
You think it's love, or it is unconditional?
Unconditional love. Of course, unconditional is something you can't get your head around.
No.
It's just unconditional. Yeah, it is.
So why are we here then? Where's this all come from? Just because?
Nothing.
Yeah.
For no reason. That's freedom. No reason, no meaning, no purpose, no intention. It isn't even really here. It's just an appearance of nothing.
Many people will call you a nihilist.
Yeah, well, that's because they try to bring what we're talking to into their experience. What would it be like for me? If what I'm hearing is true for me, but it isn't for you.
So if we were to dig into that nihilism and nothing have, the understanding that nothing has any meaning, it's always related to the individual, because it's either the individual has meaning,
Yeah.
or the individual has no meaning. So this just is.
No. And it's the same with hope. The individual lives in a continuum of hope. And this message can sort of bring about a sense of hopelessness. And that's just the other side of hope. But that's not really what the message is that it's hopeless. It's just that there isn't any hope, which has nothing to do with there being hope and hopelessness. It's something completely different.
Do you not hope for anything anymore? Well,
There isn't any one to hope, but if you asked if there was any hope, there could be hope for sushi sometime.
Yeah. You're very easy to get Christmas presents for, because there's just there's no one to be disappointed.
There's still preferences.
Yeah. Well, where are they? What's going on with them?
Just
are they the body, would you say?
Yeah, totally. Well, it's an amalgam of, circumstances and genetics.
Bodies apparently moving.
Yeah.
Bodies apparently happening. That's about it.
That's about it. Well, and noises and sunlight and trees. There's just what is.
Yeah. Is there any misconceptions or things you often don't get to mention about this that you?
No, not really.
Want the chance to?
No. There actually, in the end, there isn't actually a message that's trying to be shared. It's fundamentally just a response to the experience that says something needs to happen. There isn't any sort of proselytization or any sort of energy to tell anyone anything. It will respond. And there's a real passion about that response, but there isn't any drive.
When you're not, are we always responding then, would you say? I mean, not literally, not just to people, not just to conversation, but if I go for a walk and there's apparently a tree, there's response.
Yeah, apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What would happen if no one came to your meetings? You just be.
Well, I wouldn't be, I wouldn't go either.
That makes things easier, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Not that I want him to end. It's just, I mean, the question of why did Jim start doing the meetings is just because.
Yeah. Oh, someone asked.
And so you responded by agreeing.
By doing meetings, yeah.
Yeah. Has anything changed over the course?
More people.
Yeah. The way it's approached naturally? Any changes?
Probably words have changed. Certain words have been dropped because they create reactions. That's not the point. I used to use the word anarchy because this is freedom. It's just another word for freedom, limitlessness or rulelessness without any rules. Freedom, anarchy is a good word for that, but there was some reactions to that. And so generally I'll say freedom now. Unrecognizable freedom.
Do you feel it's somehow getting simpler, the message? Do you feel, I mean, it's getting a little bit too close to like something speaking through you, and I don't want to do that, but do you feel that the non-message, let's just say that, is getting refined, getting simpler?
I don't know that it's getting, I mean, in the way that certain words have been lost, you could say that's refined, but the fundamental nothingness that speaks doesn't change.
It sounds like mystery. We end up at pure mystery.
Yeah. Well, unknowing.
Unknowing.
Yeah.
That's such a useless word, isn't
it? Well, the whole message is useless.
Yeah.
There isn't even a message. That's how useless it is.
So just talking is happening.
Apparently.
Apparently, yeah. It really is fantastic.
Yeah, I love it.
I do wanna continue to delve just into because when you say everything is nothing is this, and you said form and void, I mean that does have relations, seems to have relations to Buddhist
Oh yeah, I think
philosophy, but
a lot of the religions and even spirituality, um, more or less either pays lip service, that's a little cynical, or has its foundation in the same, nothingness that this does. And, a good example is if everything is already pure in the same way that everything is already perfect. If an individual would hear that, it would have the experience of feeling like it doesn't know purity. But I don't know purity. It's just pure. And so it would come up with some sort of idea of how to find it.
so it's perfect because it is,
It's perfect because it is and it isn't.
and it isn't.
Yeah.
Could you go into that again?
Well, it's the
The whole
same. It's
thing.
just nothing appearing.
Nothing.
It's unknowing happening. So all these words that sort of suggest the insubstantiality of the appearance or the impersonality of the appearance.
So I mean, to go back to my pen, if
Yeah.
the pen was there as a thing and it somehow just went, then we'd say no thing. Is that the
No.
no?
No, it is no thing.
In
It is
in
no
what sense?
thing penning. It is unknowing penning.
Got it.
It's like unknowing speaking and unknowing hearing.
Got it.
Everything is absent of solidity. Everything is absent of meaning and purpose.
But it's so difficult to say that because it's always largely going to be filtered through the individual. When you say no meaning, then start thinking in existential terms.
This message isn't for the individual. It doesn't even recognize an individual. An individual is obviously an illusion that feels like what's happening is a reality because it senses itself as a reality. And that knowingness overlooks the simplicity of nothing happening and that it's not separate. The individual will hear what we're talking about as a philosophical or an ideological idea that's separate from what's hearing or what's seeing. And all this is saying is there isn't anything separate.
What is the message for them?
Nothing. Same as everything else.
Nothing.
Everything is for nothing.
So this is nothing, speaking to nothing, to hear nothing.
About nothing.
About nothing. And sometimes the individual seems to get in the way.
Yeah.
So the individual can only shoot itself in the foot.
The individual, the appearance of it's not like the individual could stop shooting itself in the foot. The individual and the sense of loss are the same. Just as the individual and the need, which is seeking, are the same. There isn't an individual that doesn't seek.
You might think I'm toying with you with this question right near the end here. What advice would you give to people who listen to this, who have
send me all your money. It helps.
You will get there faster.
That's right. You'll get there faster. If you want to have the experience of traveling lighter, send me all your money.
Yeah.
No, of course there aren't any individuals. There isn't any. Yeah, I mean, what to say? There's nothing to say to an individual about this. It can't hear it, and there isn't an individual to talk to.
Yeah. There you go. You have a website.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is a website.
There's a website for nothing.
Yeah.
Is it simply -this.com?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
and you also have a YouTube channel with your other talks. And
Yeah.
you do retreats where you also talk about nothing.
Yeah.
I mean that again. I mean the kindest
That's
way.
what happens.
There
isn't anyone to talk about nothing, but that is what apparently happened.
Yeah. Is there anything you'd like to add, Jim?
No, that was great, James. I appreciate it.
It's good fun. Thank you very much.